You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. Hello. Can you believe it is August? Well, it's not technically August for me yet because I am recording this in the midst of Mercury retrograde. However, I'm recording it for the month of August. So by the time you listen to this, it will be August. And what? How did that happen? It's wild to think that we are already 8 months into the year. And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing that time seems to be moving quickly because hopefully we will be out of whatever insanity timeline we are existing in currently a little bit quicker. But yeah, so I'm recording this, like I said, in the midst of this Mercury retrograde. And it's so funny because I know the bare minimum when it comes to astrology. I mean, I rarely talk about it because it's not my wheelhouse. I don't have the knowledge to talk about it. And so if I do talk about it, I'm talking about it only based on what I actually know. And it's been so bizarre. I'm like, why is one terrible thing happening right after the other, in succession? It's absolutely wild. And it's like every day brings with it a new crisis. I've never experienced something quite like what I'm experiencing right now. And then I found out Mercury was in retrograde, specifically affecting the cardinal signs, and I am riddled with cardinal signs in my chart. So yeah, if you are someone who is going through it, this retrograde, I see you and I'm holding space for you because what the fuck? Oh my God. But anyway, I am trying to hold on to this idea that two things can be true very tightly right now. You know, we could be experiencing turmoil and chaos and frustration and feel so uncertain, and then also still be experiencing love and joy and creativity and awe and wonder and all those wonderful, wonderful things. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, actually, because I channeled my frustration into creating a few tarot spreads, which you may have seen on Instagram a few weeks ago. And they were inspired by the just utter shit show that has been Mercury retrograde. But they were also still designed to be universal. And one of them I am calling Tension of Opposites. And that's the spread that I want to do with all of you today for our month ahead reading for August. Mainly because I do think it's an important concept to continue talking about. I talk about it pretty regularly, and it's rooted in the theories and application of dialectical behavior therapy. And you know, I love a good crossover. So that's what we're doing today. Before we hop into the actual spread and collective reading, I just want to share a little bit about this concept of opposites and dialectical behavior therapy and kind of coexisting with all of our emotional layers and tensions. And I think that this idea of opposites being able to coexist and holding multiple truths at the same time is actually quite inherent in tarot. I mean, you think about, for example, readings that you've done where maybe you pull two cards and they just completely contradict one another. A good example of this would be maybe you pull the Four of Swords, which is saying, slow down, rest, recover. But then right next to it, on about the same topic, you've also pulled the Eight of Wands, which is saying, take action. You're moving quickly. Let's keep going. And so on the surface level, those two cards seem like they completely contradict each other. They're opposites. And so then we have to work within the reading to figure out, okay, how can I allow these to coexist? How can I, kind of find some sort of thread that, weaves these two together in some way? Another example would be like the star and the Four of Pentacles. So with the star, we are experiencing vulnerability and openness and hope. And then with the Four of Pentacles, we've got this like protection thing happening. We're conserving our energy, conserving our resources. There isn't this, it's quite the opposite of vulnerability, actually. And so the goal is, how do we sit with the ambiguity or the discomfort of the fact that these two things are opposites, and yet we are being presented with them at the same time? I think our first instinct is to figure out how to make these cards agree with each other or even be supportive of one another, and maybe even, or maybe assume that one is like the message that we should take away. So let's stick with the star and get rid of the Four of Pentacles, or, let's keep the Four of Swords, but, forget the Eight of Wands, or even pulling clarifying cards in this process. So you could see like that might be a nervous system response of, oh, I need to quickly pull a clarifying card because I don't have the answer right away. I don't have certainty. I'm confused. And we're trying to increase our level of tolerance and discomfort around the confusion and the ambiguity. And I think that's where dialectical thinking, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, comes into play in terms of how we're experiencing the cards. Another component too that I want to share is this concept doesn't exist just with two different cards. It also happens within individual cards. And this is a practice that I do for myself personally all the time. Like, this is a part of my just personal relationship with tarot. And that's looking at the traditional meaning, understanding, respecting that traditional meaning, but then also paying attention to the imagery, my own experiences, the context of the reading, what I'm projecting onto the card, and asking myself, well, what is in opposition here? What two truths can I hold at the same time? In what ways is this card two separate things? And I think instead of trying to just get an interpretation right, in this case, in a dialectical case, and not every reading has to be like this. When you listen to my podcast or you follow my work, I'm throwing out different therapeutic ideas for you to try on and strengthen your relationship to yourself and the cards. And I think this one in particular allows us to really engage our curiosity in ways that might even be foreign to us. And when we do that, we're increasing cognitive flexibility, which is really important to our overall just psychological well-being. Okay, so that is my reasoning behind why we are doing what we're doing today. So I do want to go ahead and start pulling cards and explore this whole tension of opposites and see what comes out. I did do this for myself when I was designing the spread originally, but I didn't spend a ton of time on it. And it was more just to see like what would happen with the cards, which is what I often do when I'm creating spreads. So if you want, pause me for a second and go grab your own cards so that you can shuffle and pull alongside me so we can see what you get. And plus, I love when you all reach out to me and tell me what you ended up pulling. I think that's so fun because sometimes I will do an episode and it's like everyone ends up pulling the same cards. And that's super exciting for me. I love that. Oh, and also real quick before I start shuffling and pulling for this spread, one of the questions I get asked the most about these episodes is, where can I see the pictures or the spread, the picture of the cards that you've pulled and the spread that you're using? The best place to get that or find it is to sign up for my email list. You can head over to thetarotdiagnosis.com. There are multiple places on my website where you can sign up for that. I send out an email when new episodes go out, and that email is a very robust overview of the episode, so you know what you're getting yourself into when you listen. And then I will share a photo of the cards that I pulled along with the spread. So if that is something that's important to you and you want to see the cards and the spread, I recommend you go over to the website. sign up to get my emails. And I do often also post them on Instagram. I've been trying to be better at sharing the spread and the cards pulled, at least for these episodes, when I post my episode announcement on there. So yeah, those are the two places where you can find those. All right, let's get into the spread. So this is a 4-card spread, and cards 1 and 2 are going to be the opposites that we're exploring. So the prompt for these 2 cards is, what are 2 seemingly opposite experiences that can exist at the same time and both be true? And then card 3 is going to be, what tension exists between these opposites? And then card 4 is, how do I move forward without resolving the tension? And that final spot, I actually just posted these spreads today. So I'm recording this episode the day that I posted these spreads on Instagram, but by the time you listen to this, it will have been several weeks in the past, which is always so weird for me to think about when I'm recording this. But so I am kind of bracing myself to get some DMs about that final question, because I do wonder if folks are going to be curious about that. Because I think a lot of times when we're working with tarot, we are using the cards to find answers, to find clarity, to get certainty, to feel a sense of relief, a sense of hope. And that is not always the best option, to use the reason, rather, to use the cards. And because the reality is the cards do not hold all the answers. They allow us to see and experience different possibilities. So with card 4 being, how do I move forward without resolving the tension? It's really asking us, how do I sit in the discomfort? What does that look like? Because I think so many of us, it's so natural for us to want to immediately step into problem solving mode. I know I have to catch myself all the time, especially working with clients. In fact, I will call it out. I will tell clients, I'll be like, hold on a second. I can feel myself moving into problem solving mode or solution focused mode. And I am not a solution focused therapist. That is not the lens through which I practice. And so I'm kind of modeling for them in that moment. Oh, I've caught myself because I'm wanting to, move too quickly into a solution focused mode, when that would be bypassing the work that we are actually doing together. So this card 4 is basically that moment put into question form. How do we move forward without immediately resolving the tension? Okay. I keep saying we're going to pull cards, and then something else pops into my head, and I just start rambling on about this thing that pops into my head. So let's finally pull cards. So I am using my trusty Tarot Vintage today because that's what I need in my life. So that's what we're using. So we're going to pull card 1 and 2, or cards 1 and 2 right off the bat, because those are going to be our opposite experiences that can both be true at the same time. All right. And we have, we have the High Priestess and the Empress, which is fascinating because they are cards 2 and 3. So there is not much room in between these 2 cards. And not what I would have expected to pull whatsoever. So I think because these don't feel so vastly different to me, I want to start with what is similar. So let's start there. I think first glance, they're both deeply inviting, deeply intuitive, deeply embodied with their surroundings and their beliefs and their work. There's a lot of receptivity that I feel like exists within these 2 cards. So I want to start there, acknowledge that. There's also just a lot of nature surrounding them, and a lot of both show excessive amounts of pomegranates, which I think is fascinating. The Empress is wearing them, and the High Priestess, they are behind them on the curtain in between the 2 pillars. So there's a lot of, and then another similarity in the Empress, which actually, I touched on this recently. I can't remember if it was something I was writing about or if it was something I shared in the podcast. But if you look closely behind the Empress, there is water flowing behind her, a little like river that looks like, or creek that looks like it turns into a waterfall. And then we have the water behind the High Priestess. So there's so much overlap between these two cards. So you can see why, I'm sitting here wanting to explore the tension of opposites, and tarot gives me things that feel quite similar right off the bat. But we're not going to stay focused on what's similar because we're talking about opposites. So one thing that does stick out, though, in terms of the tension of opposites between these two cards is the High Priestess feels very internal and the Empress feels very external. So with the High Priestess, there's a lot of quiet observation, quiet thinking, a lot of internal processing, a lot of, again, that witnessing, that observing in order to gather information. You know, she's holding this scroll that says Torah. Clearly, she is a gatherer of information. And also not even just gathering information, retaining information, holding on to it. She might not be giving it away yet. She's probably trying to figure out what to do with that information. And I do realize also, I'm just, it's just a personal preference. I try not to gender the tarot. And I notice that I am using feminine pronouns right now as I'm talking about these. So you might hear me go back and forth. So we see this kind of internal experience with the High Priestess. And then on the other hand, with the Empress, and again, this is just my observation, my feelings, my assessment. Yours might be very different, and that's okay. I want to hear your thoughts if you're interested in sharing them. But with the High Priestess, she feels more external. There is this openness to have a shared experience with others. She's observing, but she's also kind of waiting to nurture, waiting to create. There's this expressiveness about her. And I think it's interesting also the way she's holding what kind of looks like a scepter. I actually need to look up exactly what it is that she's holding because I do not know off the top of my head. So both are holding something, but the way that the Empress is holding this item is, again, more of like open, like the arms are away from the body. And with the High Priestess, there's this kind of holding and almost the robes are hiding her arms and you only see one little glimpse of the hand. It just feels more closed off. And the Empress the body language is significantly more open. So if we were looking at these as opposites, the phrase or the words that are coming to mind are, I can trust my intuition and still engage with the world around me. Or I can honor my inner knowing, my gut instincts, and still be curious about the external world or still invite people into my world. And if we even think about these from a lens of introversion and extroversion, especially as I've gotten older and I've just seen my own introversion and extroversion be quite fluid throughout my life and experience that in other people. These two cards particularly remind me that we often feel like we have to choose between these ways of being. Like, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? Or am I an introspective High Priestess or an expressive Empress? Am I creative and supposed to be creating things to put out into the world? Or am I supposed to just be a very deep thinker and keep things to myself? This is where the tension of opposites starts to emerge and we start to see it kind of bubble up with these two cards. But before I decide what the tension of opposites is, let's pull the card 3, to see what it says. And again, card 3 is what tension exists between these two cards. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Another card that I would not have expected to pull. Tarot's challenging me today. So I ended up pulling the Ace of Cups. And God, there's so much water happening in all these cards. Wow. So this is really interesting because the Ace of Cups typically, traditionally, we think of as, this kind of overflowing of emotions, usually in a good way. There's a lot of vulnerability in giving and receiving here. And, I think when we stop trying to force some level of certainty, that's when we start to experience this free flowing energy of the Ace of Cups. And I think that the tension of the Ace of Cups is saying stay open, but in between the High Priestess and the Empress, we have no, stay kind of closed off, stay to yourself, stay introspective, stay introverted. And then we have the Empress saying, no, share, let's create, do something with this knowledge and wisdom that you've gained in this intuition. And I think if we were to take this a bit deeper, I think the Ace of Cups also represents the tension of vulnerability. And now that I'm really looking at this card and the imagery of this hand, because, you look at this hand holding this cup and it's overflowing. And I'm wondering if the tension between the High Priestess and the Empress is maybe more about the emotional cost that we experience if we don't honor both, because we might feel too exposed. Is it too vulnerable to trust ourselves when we can't guarantee that our intuition is right? Is it too vulnerable to create something and say it's finished before maybe we feel ready to show it to other people? Is it too vulnerable to speak our mind, to share our space, to have these deep, meaningful experiences that both the High Priestess and the Empress offer us? And the whole point of DBT is to increase our ability to handle uncomfortable experiences. And this Ace of Cups is a vessel that can hold quite a bit of water or whatever element it is holding at the time. And now that I say that, I wonder if the tension, and you're all just hearing me kind of process this in real time. I wonder if the tension is also, will whoever I share this part of myself with be able to hold that? Do I have to choose one or the other? Do I have to be this introverted, introspective person, or can I be this creative, nurturing, expressive being? And feeling like you have to choose one or the other in order to be accepted or palatable or loved by those around you, instead of allowing yourself to sit in the discomfort and possibly know that maybe you won't be accepted for being this complex, multifaceted being. And if that's true, then those people weren't worth your time to begin with. But I think that that's what this Ace of Cups is indicating. Let's pull a final card, which is, how do I move forward without resolving this tension? Oh, another cup, 3 of Cups, which kind of feels like a solution. I'm going to try not to go there. I'm not going in the route of the solution. But the 3 of Cups, we see 3 people celebrating, enjoying each other's company. This could easily be interpreted as, be the extroverted, expressive, creative person. Move into community. Don't be introspective and move into a space of isolation. But I think that would be doing this reading a disservice if that is what we said. And I would feel like it is abandoning the whole point of this DBT-inspired spread. So instead, I'm going to look at this actually through a different therapeutic framework. And I'm going to look at this through the lens of parts work and say so the question was, how do we move forward without resolving the tension? And I think that this is, maybe too basic, but I'm going to look at this through the lens of parts work and say, okay, what is it like for us to allow all of these different parts a seat at the table? What would it be like to engage with these parts of us and be curious about them or celebrate them, hold space for them instead of just feeling like we had to choose one or the other? Which actually I'm really glad the Three of Cups came out now and kind of forced me into this parts work view, because I think that's kind of what I was saying all along with the High Priestess and the Empress, or what I was alluding to without using that particular language, is that we have these parts of us that exist that often feel in opposition. Like, how can I be both happy and mad? Or how can I be both introverted and extroverted? And the inherent tension that we feel when we are confronted with those opposing parts of ourselves. And then the Three of Cups emerges to say, yeah, that's going to happen. Just like when you are in a friend group, personalities clash, and yet you still have shared values. And some days you'll get along and some days you won't want to spend time with them. But as long as you still value that friendship and you feel like you're still growing and it's worth being connected to one another, you put in the work to nurture it. And I feel like that's what is existing here in the framework of parts work. I think I'm going to spend some time sitting with these cards and really kind of going through and seeing what else comes up. I wanted to challenge myself today and just get on here and see what happened and process with you all in real time. And I'm really curious what your all thoughts are on these cards and what came up for you in terms of the tension of opposites and what it was like to see the High Priestess and the Empress, two cards that come before and after each other, emerge as the opposites worth exploring. And did your brain go to parts work, or did your brain go to a completely different realm? I'd be super curious. Well, my hope for all of you is that August is a calm, inspiring, restful, interesting month, and that it is nothing like the Mercury retrograde that we experienced at the end of June and all throughout July. And I hope that you will enjoy the rest of your summer and enjoyed this DBT-inspired collective reading. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow the Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails, where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.